There once was a boy who turned away from the horrors his monster claimed. He tried to be free again and again, but his guilt remained until the end. Hey everyone, welcome back. One of the most integral parts to any narrative is the protagonist, the character who we, the audience, follow on their journey. Not every story needs a protagonist, but many are aided by having a central character that drives the narrative forward. For the story of Five Nights at Freddy's, our protagonist for a long time was presumed to be a nobody, a random, faceless night guard with no personality. But as time went on, that slowly changed. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the main character of the original Five Nights at Freddy's games, Michael Afton, a character whose history and characterization is even more difficult to unpack than his father's. Michael is a tricky character to talk about, since, like Afton, we rarely, if ever, see him physically, though we have even less appearances when it comes to Mike. But I've done a ton of research to hopefully try and give a cohesive history and story for you all. Though, as I said last video, the story of Five Nights at Freddy's is incredibly confusing, with many key plot points being held up by fan speculation and headcanons, so your theories about what Mike's history and characterization is may be different than mine, and that's completely okay. Comment your thoughts down below. I read every comment and I love to see the discussions. While you're here, subscribing and liking the video would also mean a ton to me, as it lets me know you like this content and it supports me in the future of my channel. With that out of the way, let's talk about the main character of the Five Nights at Freddy's games, good ol' Mike. To start us off, we get to debut Five Nights at Freddy's 1 to the analysis series properly. As a recap of the story, you the player are a brand new night guard at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a small town pizzeria with its theming being anthropomorphic animatronic animal characters. When the clocks hit 12 AM, these animatronics begin to move throughout the establishment and become antagonistic toward you, with your only defense being a camera system, a pair of door lights, and giant metal doors to lock the animatronics outside of your main office. You should lock the doors sparingly, however, as you're also trying to conserve the limited amount of power your job gives you. Survive until 6 AM for 5 nights and you'll receive a sweet payment of $120 for your hard work that week. FNAF 1 is a very simple game. The lore at this time was very underdeveloped compared to the web of events we have now, but despite these small beginnings, there are still 7 distinct characters in this game. We have the main animatronics being Freddy Fazbear, Bonnie the Bunny, Chica the Chicken, and Foxy the Pirate Fox. We also have the ghostly golden Freddy suit, and of course our fun tutorial friend, the phone guy. But then we also have the faceless character we're playing as, the night guard that took this underpaid job. In this game, he's just a stand-in for the player. He has no voice lines and no true visuals, but we do have 2 key points of interest about him. If you die, the death screen is your player character stuffed into an animatronic suit, with his eyeballs popping out of the front of the mask. By brightening the image, we can see the eyes are bluish gray, so that's something. The other key point consists of the paper slips we get for completing different parts of the game. Completing the main 5 nights and the secret 6th night gives us 2 cool checks made out to a certain Mike Schmidt, so now we know our main character's name. You can also get a pink slip if you complete any setting on the custom night, firing you for tampering with animatronics, lack of professionalism, and odor. Well, the last one is just mean. So we know that our main character's name is Mike Schmidt, he has bluish gray eyes, he apparently lacks professionalism, and he smells bad. Great. There really isn't any major characterization in this game when it comes to Mike. He falls into the realm of the silent protagonist. He doesn't speak a word and doesn't have his own opinions, thoughts, or motivations. He is quite simply a stand-in for the player and nothing more. And for a long time, years in fact, this is all we really knew about Mike Schmidt. He was just a random guy that became a night guard at Freddy's and survived all 5 nights, plus 2 extra. But believe it or not, this character would become relevant again, because after 5 other games, Mike returned to the franchise in Five Nights at Freddy's sister location. Sister Location was, in many ways, a turning point in the franchise. Instead of having lore confined to retro minigames, Sister Location was the first mainline FNAF game to feature an extensive story throughout the majority of the gameplay. The game was marketed to be bigger and more unique than any other game in the franchise at that time, with it even featuring proper voice acting for the first time in the mainline series. So imagine everyone's surprise when we first load into the game and are told to input our name into a keypad. And upon viewing this keypad, we see a tiny piece of tape with the name Mike written on it. The game also doesn't let us actually input our name. No matter what, the keypad will glitch and nickname us Eggs Benedict. I think this is meant to symbolize that this time, the character we play as is not just a stand-in for us. Our name can't be added, because we are not the viewpoint that matters in this game. We are not the main character. Mike is. Right from the beginning of the game, it's telegraphed to the player that, yes, you're playing as Mike Schmidt from the original Five Nights at Freddy's game. While this was a really cool and surprising early reveal, the question everybody asked throughout the game was, why? Why was Mike brought back after all this time? Why specifically here? What is his relevance? Well, let me recap this game for you, and I can begin to tell you why. Five Nights at Freddy's Sister Location takes place in an underground facility, housing the animatronics created by the main villain of the franchise, the purple guy in the retro minigames known as William Afton. On the surface, these animatronics were created to perform at children's birthday parties, but had the secret intention of snatching children to further Afton's goals. Now they sit here and are constantly electrically shocked to perform, lure, ensnare, and do it all over again, and they hate it. None of the animatronics want to do this anymore. They want to leave. They want out. They want to escape this constant cycle Afton has created for them, and Mike just might have given them a ticket to freedom. Throughout the nights spent in the facility, Mike performs maintenance on the animatronics. Most of them are openly antagonistic towards him while doing so, except one, that being the leader, Circus Baby. On your second night, the power momentarily goes out in Circus Baby's auditorium. Now that you're alone, Baby takes the chance to introduce herself to Mike in an untraditional way. I'm going to play her entire introduction cutscene for you so you can get the full feel. So here it is.
I don't recognize you. You are new. I remember this scenario, however. It's a strange thing to want to do, to come here. I'm curious what events would lead a person to want to spend their nights in a place like this. Willingly. Maybe curiosity, maybe ignorance. There is a space under the desk. Someone before you crafted it into a hiding place, and it worked for him. I recommend that you hurry, though. You will be safe there. Just try not to make eye contact. It will be over soon. They will lose interest.
As you can hear, Baby actively helps Mike hide from the other animatronics, and this helpful demeanor is something she continues to showcase throughout the future nights. You can tell by her dialogue that, for an animatronic, she sounds incredibly human. In her voice lines you can hear somberness, joy, suspicion, confusion, and more emotions that you wouldn't expect an animatronic to feel. But something changes on the fourth night. At the end of the third night, Mike was jump scared by Funtime Foxy. Presumably, this should kill him, but no. Instead, the next night opens and Mike is locked into a spring lock suit by Baby.
I kidnapped you.
Not only that, but as she speaks, you may notice a big personality change.
You're inside something that came from my old pizzeria. I don't think it was ever used. At least not the way it was meant to be used. You're in the scooping room. Do you know why they call it the scooping room? It's because, dummy, this is the room where they use the scooper. I thought that would be obvious.
This is not the same Baby we're used to. Here, she is openly antagonistic. She apparently kidnapped Mike and locked him into a highly dangerous spring lock suit. To further explain, spring-lock suits are supposed to double as both an animatronic with its metal endoskeleton, crossbeams, and wires, as well as a suit that can push these things back into the recesses of the shell and allow a human performer to slip inside. FNAF 3 told us before just how dangerous and deadly these things were to wear even when they were brand new, and Baby haphazardly shoved Mike into one that's presumably pretty old and worn. While she does open the face plates eventually so we can be saved, she doesn't actively try to help us like before. We're left to our own devices to try and survive. During the night, we also see Ballora, another animatronic, get scooped by something called the Scooper, which can quickly take out the insides of an animatronic for cleaning. But this also apparently disables them for a good long while. While she's disabled, we have to deal with her little minions known as the Mini-Renas, and Baby does nothing to help us, not even a hint on how to fight them. When you do eventually make it out alive and come back the next night, Baby is now back to being your friend, somber as ever. It's very odd and inconsistent for her. So now there are some major red flags going up surrounding Baby's behavior, but there is one major question you may still have. Why didn't Funtime Foxy's jump scare kill Mike the night before? In these games, jump scares are instant deaths. There is no way to come back from it, so why didn't Funtime Foxy's work? Well, as we learn from the secret blueprints in the extras menu that showcase the hidden features of each animatronic, Funtime Foxy has something called a remote floor anchor that stops them in place. And interestingly, the animatronic that controls this anchor is Circus Baby. So Baby did save Mike from Funtime Foxy, but then proceeded to stuff him into a spring-lock suit. Why would she do this? Well, more answers are revealed on night 5. On this night, Mike is tasked with taking a chip from Circus Baby, which means we finally get to see her face to face. Only when we do, it's not quite as expected. Baby says there's something bad inside of me, but there is nothing in her. After we take the chip, she tells us that Ballora is following Mike and wants to get him, but that doesn't make any sense. We just saw Ballora get scooped the night before, and if you check Ballora's blueprint, you can see that she has a remote activation feature that is bound to Circus Baby, just like Funtime Foxy's floor anchor. So theoretically, Baby could just deactivate her. Regardless, Mike follows Baby's directions, moving through the darkness, until you meet the room that you were in before. The scooping room, where all the animatronics insides get scooped out for cleaning. It turns out Ballora was following Mike, but she wasn't alone. The scooper has scooped out all of the animatronics, leaving their outer shells all over the floor of the scooping room. In their place, all of the animatronics, including Circus Baby, have formed to create Ennard, a mass of wires and insides comprised of all the sister location animatronics. Here, we find out exactly what Baby's long game was during all these nights.
I've been out before, but they always put me back. They always put us back inside. There's nowhere for us to hide here. There is nowhere to go when we look like this. But if we looked like you, then we could hide. If we looked like you, then we would have somewhere to go. The scooper only hurts for a moment.
Well, that's horrifying. Mike is scooped by the scooper, his insides forcibly ripped out, and Ennard proceeds to take their place, wearing his skin as a suit. The final scene of the game shows Mike in the mirror with his bluish-gray eyes replaced with robotic purple ones with white pinpricks, showcasing Ennard's takeover of his body. Michael is gone. There is only Ennard now. So, yeah, that's a lot. In this game, our poor guy Mike went through the ringer, and at the end of it, he has seemingly died. I mean, his insides have been scooped out, and now he's being worn as a flesh suit. There's no possible way he survived, right? A while after Sister Location's release, the creator Scott Cawthon released a free update, including a unique custom night edition for people who beat the main game and found both endings. It uses the office from the non-canon alternate ending of Sister Location to create a sit and survival formula like the previous game iterations with the funtime animatronics. It's a pretty fun addition, but the update also has an incredible amount of lore significance. Every time you beat a new challenge, you'll be rewarded with a special retro-styled cutscene. This consists of a man walking throughout his neighborhood day after day, and each day his body starts to progressively rot more and more, until it turns almost completely purple. The rotting forces him to hobble along like a zombie as everyone on his street hides from him. This of course is Mike's body being piloted by Ennard, and day after day the body slowly started to rot until it very ironically looks a lot like the purple guy, or William Afton's sprite representation in the minigames. It took a while to figure out, but now we know that this isn't actually William Afton, it's just a visual callback. The dead giveaway that this is Mike is that in the first of these cutscenes, you can see those bluish gray eyes that he has from the death screen in FNAF 1. On the final retro cutscene, Mike's body is completely purple and hobbling around. The disguise is failing, so Ennard decides to abandon ship and launches out of Mike's body at record speed. Mike's body is left on the sidewalk, but we start to hear Baby's voice tell him, "You won't die." Mike then reforms, standing up straight, while Ennard lurks in the sewers. Mike somehow managed to survive his wounds despite everything. How? How is this even possible? I won't go on a big tangent, but to summarize, we learned from the books that a key reason why William Afton was committing all these crimes was to experiment with Remnant. Remnant is essentially a soul goo that can be infused into metal to make the soul of the recently deceased bind to an inanimate object, but Remnant has a lot of other uses, including healing properties. So presumably, since Mike's body was an inanimate object at this point, the remnant of the leftover animatronics rubbed off on the body, and his soul was bound to his own corpse. How freaky is that? Of course, since Remnant does have healing properties, a major theory is that Mike's body just started to heal itself over time and eventually went back to how he originally looked. But I was always iffy on this. The idea of Mike being almost like the Invisible Man, bound in rags to cover himself while he's a purple creature underneath is such a cool thought to me. Plus, him smelling bad as a rotten corpse like the pink slip says in FNAF 1 would make a lot more sense. However, realistically, I don't know how feasible it is for our main character to be a rotting corpse for who knows how many years. Though, funny enough, that is not the last time we hear from Michael in this game. After completing all of the custom night challenges, you are rewarded with a special final cutscene, where we, for the first and as of right now, only time in the series, get to hear Michael's voice in a profound monologue. I'm going to let it play so you all can hear it loud and clear. Here it is.
Father, it's me, Michael. I did it. I found it. It was right where you said it would be. They were all there. They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you. And I found her. I put her back together, just like you asked me to. She's free now. But something is wrong with me. I should be dead, but I'm not. I've been living in shadows. There is only one thing left for me to do now. I'm going to come find you. I'm going to come find you.
So, okay, where do I even start? Let's begin by covering the major reveal, then we'll focus on the characterization. In this cutscene, Michael talks to his father as he relays that he has done as he asked, and now that he has, he was going to come find him. Michael in this cutscene is voiced by PJ Haywood, who you might know better for also being the voice of our main villain, William Afton. The cutscene also shows us a burned down Fazbear's Fright and Springtrap. All of these teases telegraph to the player that Michael's father is, of course, William Afton, meaning that Michael's name was never Mike Schmidt. It was fake. His real name has always been Michael Afton. Comparing Michael's voice to his father's is like night and day. We know that this is what Michael sounds like after being scooped, but there is some notable differences between the performance PJ delivers for him and his father. As an example, here is a line from Michael after being scooped.
They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you.
And one from William after becoming Springtrap.
What a deceptive calling. I knew it was a lie the moment I heard it, obviously, but it is intriguing nonetheless.
Compared to William, Michael has a much more gentle and soft tone to his delivery. You can tell there's so much less anger compared to Will, and way more somberness. He sounds deflated and melancholic. Even his dry chuckle sounds like he's on the verge of tears. It's a tone almost reminiscent of Baby's sadness in the main nights. Michael says that he should be dead, that he's living in shadows, and as he speaks, you can hear him sound more crestfallen. This also, to me anyway, gives a bit of evidence that while he is still alive in a sense, Michael's body is still somewhat broken, meaning he can't fit into normal society. Though he might just be hiding in shadows since Michael Afton should be dead, which could be a reason why he chose the new name of Mike Schmidt. Interestingly, when he says, "They thought I was you," he gives a dry, short chuckle. It sounds somewhat snarky. It's slight, but it's noticeable. It could be a brief echo of how his personality might have been before being scooped. While it's only a 1-minute cutscene, to me, Michael displays just a bit of personality for us to glean for our main character. Now we know that he's a bit snarky, but also incredibly sad and somber. While Baby told Michael that he wouldn't die, she also said earlier that the scooper does hurt for a moment. The pain he felt at that moment was probably excruciating and has left him broken, both mentally and physically. He might not have been this way before, but the experiences of being scooped and worn as a suit definitely changed him. It's really sad. But I want to draw attention to what he says at the beginning of his monologue. He says that he found it, and they were all there. But most importantly, that he put her back together. The context clues alone give us a lot of information. William did build these robots after all, so he sent Michael to the underground facility to find the animatronics he built. But then there's that last piece of the puzzle, put her back together. What exactly does this mean? I'm going to summarize this part, but essentially, we find out in Sister Location that William had 3 children, a younger son, a middle daughter, and an older son. The daughter's name was Elizabeth, and she was told that Circus Baby was built just for her by William, even though she was never actually built for her. At one point, Elizabeth got too close to Circus Baby, and since Baby was made to snatch children, she did just that. Elizabeth's soul was then bound to Circus Baby, and that's why Michael was sent to the underground facility. He was sent there by William to free her. Considering he says that he put her back together, I think he had some context as to what happened to his sister. He knows that Elizabeth's soul was bound to Baby, which lends more credence as to why he would be so willing to trust her. That being said, he also most likely had absolutely no idea what the plan actually was. He did not know that the end goal was to be tricked and used as a flesh suit so Elizabeth and the other animatronics could escape. William lied to him, and he lied because the Funtime animatronics really hate him. As Mike says, "They thought I was you." William sent Mike because he knew they looked alike. He knew the Funtimes would mistake Mike for him. Keep in mind that he programmed the animatronics to do this song and dance of fooling parents and capturing children for a long enough while to where the animatronics are fed up with it. If they didn't do their job, they were shocked. If they did do their job, they were shocked anyway. It made the animatronics loathe William and loathe the underground facility that they were stuck in. So they formulated a plan to escape through a technician's body, Michael's body. Of course, this didn't exactly end up working out, as we can see from the retro cutscenes. But now that Michael is back to himself, mostly, he knows exactly what he has to do next. As he says, "I'm going to come find you." This is the one malicious line that he has in his monologue, because he has realized that his father betrayed him, and he wants to make him pay for what he did. He may not know where William is, but he has made it his mission to find him and stop him. And while this is the end of everything Michael has in the main game, there is another side of the game that deserves its own section. After completion of each night, Mike gets to go home to his little house, sit down with his popcorn, and watch his favorite soap opera, The Immortal and the Restless. It's basically a parody of every cheesy soap opera and vampire cliche you can think of. On your first viewing, it's a pretty fun time, but there's a lot of hidden meaning in these goofy cutscenes. I mentioned in my William Afton video that we know next to nothing about William's wife, but a common theory people have is that The Immortal and the Restless might be a parallel to William's relationship with his unnamed wife. I mean, Vlad, the vampire character, is even wearing a purple suit, and the whole show is centered upon how bad of a father and husband he is. The reason why I didn't bring this up in my previous video is because we already know how bad of a father Afton really is, and nothing Vlad does in the show can be directly translated to something Afton may have done as a partner other than generally being a bad husband. And we still have no real frame of reference for Mrs. Afton other than she might have existed. I personally just don't subscribe to the theory that this show represents William and his wife. The reason I bring the show up now is because of its more likely connection to Mike. Every night, he happily chomps on some popcorn while watching this silly soap, and he seems pretty into it. Why is that? Well, I theorize it's because it may remind Michael of his relationship with his father. To showcase it to you, we're going to watch a full episode of the show. Don't worry, they're less than a minute long. Make sure to pay close attention to how Vlad acts during it and how he treats the people around him.
Another day, another dramatic entry in the lives of Vlad and his distressed mistress. Where will they go? What will they do? All of that and more happening now.
Clara, I tell you, the baby isn't mine.
Count, I tell you that it is. You're the only vampire I've ever loved. And the baby turns his bottles into powdered milk.
That doesn't mean anything.
He sleeps on the ceiling fan.
Upright or upside down?
What does it matter? You need to be part of your son's life.
I'm an old man, Clara. I can't be a father.
Well, then at least pay your child support, you deadbeat!
What I noticed is how during the episode, Vlad repeatedly lies to Clara about everything regarding the baby and himself, despite the truth being in both their faces. Over and over, Clara tells Vlad about things the baby can do that aren't normal, and he repeatedly shuts her down with excuses after excuses. I think Mike is in a very similar situation. William sent him to the underground facility most likely with little to no real information on what was going on. And that leads me into my next question. What do you think the baby is supposed to represent in the show? I think it's meant to stand in for all the weird paranormal things that are happening, things that Mike most likely repeatedly asks his father about, and in response he is constantly shut down. In my previous video on William Afton, I analyzed how in the intro cutscene of Sister Location he sidesteps the question asked about how the animatronics are designed so he can focus on the innocent design features instead of the more disturbing ones. And I think this behavior is what he does to anyone who asks something he doesn't want to answer. He sidesteps questions or redirects them, like how Clara repeatedly talks to Vlad about the baby and how it's quite obviously his child, but he always finds an answer to whatever she says or just sidesteps it completely. The answers he gives or the questions he asks in response don't even make sense. Why does it matter if the baby sleeps upright or upside down? It doesn't. He's just looking for a way to sidestep the conversation. There are some very obvious, weird, paranormal things happening in Sister Location. Anyone with a brain can see this. But I have a feeling if Michael ever talks to William about this, he just pulls a Vlad and redirects or sidesteps the question. At the end of the show, Clara misinterprets Vlad's confession of finding her diamond ring at a kid's meal as him finally taking responsibility of his kid, but of course, we know that's obviously not the case. I think this may be a parallel to Mike believing his father cares about him, but in reality, he's just ignoring the obvious and misinterpreting William's motives. There's some evidence later on that shows William never really cared about Michael, and we'll get to it soon. And I know this is all heavy speculation, but there is something that proves this theory can hold some water, because we finally completed all of the story elements relating to Mike in Sister Location. Now we can get a move on to something even more important, a children's logbook. Wait, what? Yes, you heard me right. Say hello to the Five Nights at Freddy's Survival Logbook, an in-universe scribbled-on security book owned by no one other than good old Mike. I know it may seem weird to analyze a logbook of all things. I mean, the main purpose of this book is to be filled in by kids, but what if I told you that this may be one of the most lore-relevant books released for FNAF before the 2020s? Because while on the surface it looks like a silly children's activity book, the logbook is meant to be something ripped right from the world of Five Nights at Freddy's. The book treats you like a new security guard working at a Freddy's location, though I don't think this was actually given to night guards at the pizzerias. In this illustration, you can see Foxy in the Fazbear's Fright office from FNAF 3, years after the main pizzeria chain closed down. I theorized that this logbook was meant to be a cute handout for kids in the Fazbear's Fright location. The big draw of Fazbear's Fright is that it's playing on the ghost stories surrounding the old pizzerias, and the security guard is the starring role. So giving these out to customers of the attraction would only add to the immersion, and since Mike is the one writing in the logbook, it could lend some credence to the theory that Mike is who we play as in FNAF 3. Oh, and speaking of, yes, Mike is the one writing in this logbook with a red pen. You can find him answer a lot of the questions the logbook asks, or drawing some cute illustrations as answers instead, and his answers give a lot of insight into his personality, meaning we can analyze it. For example, upon being asked why he wanted to apply to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza in the first place, his answer is that employees get free pizza. He also crosses out words like success and replaces it with survival, or difficulties with certain death, or security threats with animatronic threats. Remember how I said there was a tiny bit of snark in Michael's voice back during his cutscene in Sister Location? Well, that's kicked up to 11 here. Now that he's had more time after the Scooper incident to cope with what he's gone through, we can see his real personality is incredibly snarky. Upon being asked what type of gift basket he would want when he completes his week, he draws a cute illustration of the money basket mentioned in Sister Location, and not the exotic Butters basket he would have gotten if he completed his final night. He also had this really funny response to a PR disaster. If someone told him, "My child said Freddy bit him," Mike's response would be, "He tripped and fell on Freddy's teeth, not our fault." That made me laugh when I read it. Mike is truthfully pretty funny. In one of the drawings, you could see him locking Freddy out of his office and him doing a little dance. In another, you could see him dressed as a superhero shooting eye lasers at Freddy. And then there's another where upon being asked where he sees himself in 5 years, he just drew his own tombstone. There's also a ton of other fun facts he gives about himself. Apparently, he has a bad habit of chewing gum excessively. He actually enjoyed the casual bongos in Sister Location. He wants to go on a tropic vacation, and to prove my point from before, he says that he relates to Clara from The Immortal and the Restless because, and I quote, "Everything about this place is crazy, and no one seems to notice except me." So, wow, yeah, this logbook is really important for Michael's character. It feels a bit weird that all of this information is locked behind a book, and not only that, an activity book of all things, but honestly, I'm just glad it exists. A lot of the information it provides is just cute fun facts about Mike, but there are some things in here we can glean. On top of knowing he has an addiction to chewing gum, he loves watching soap operas and wants to take a tropical vacation, we also now know that his personality has always been pretty snarky. That "they thought I was you" line and chuckle in Sister Location have been expanded into a more fleshed out personality trait. The book also hints that Michael may have had a genuine passion for art. These little doodles he made range from funny to straight up beautiful. There's some very obvious skill present here. Overall, I'm glad this book exists, as it gives a lot of characterization to our main character without directly telling us, which is a very FNAF thing to do, let's be honest. But there is one drawing in this book that raises some eyebrows, a drawing of a very specific animatronic, Nightmare Fredbear. And with this, I could lead us into the most crucial part of our analysis, Mike's backstory in FNAF 4. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is an interesting game to look back on. At the time, this was supposed to answer all of the questions we as players still had, but in reality, all it did was make more. It was marketed as the final chapter, but of course, as we know, it wasn't. The FNAF franchise continued, and the purpose of this game for a long time would remain unclear, until this drawing popped up in the logbook. To briefly summarize the story, in the minigames we play as a young unnamed boy throughout his birthday week. This boy was terrified of the animatronics at Fredbear's family diner, so much so that he would often break down sobbing at the sight of them. Throughout the minigames, he is also relentlessly bullied by his older brother, who wears a Foxy mask to spook him. Eventually, this leads to the older brother and his friends shoving the younger brother's head into the Fredbear animatronic's jaw, and the jaw crushes the head of the boy, which would eventually lead to him passing away. During the gameplay of FNAF 4, you are trapped in a room with one door to your left, one to your right, your bed behind you, and a closet in front of you. Each one houses a different animatronic you have to fend off in order to survive the night. These animatronics are monstrous versions of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and finally, Fredbear. Now that you know the basics of FNAF 4, we can talk about why this one seemingly insignificant doodle is so important. Somehow, Michael knows what Nightmare Fredbear looks like, and he knows him well enough to draw him in exact detail. The reason why this is important is because for a long time, and when this logbook was released, it was heavily believed that FNAF 4 was a dream. All the hints in the game led to this. Heck, the animatronics are even called the Nightmare animatronics. The common belief was that this nightmare was all concocted by the cried child from the minigames, meaning he would be the only one to actually see these nightmare animatronics. So how does Michael know what Nightmare Fredbear looks like? Well, one of the secrets in Sister Location gives us a pretty good clue. If you activate the secret alternate ending route, you can find this hidden office, housing the Fredbear plushie the young boy talks to in the minigames. By activating an Easter egg, you can also view multiple camera angles on the bedroom from FNAF 4. And suddenly, things start to slowly make more sense. The gameplay wasn't a dream, it was real. Kinda. The events in Room were real to an extent, but the Nightmare animatronics weren't, and the explanation is, funny enough, given in another one of the FNAF books. In Tales from the Pizzaplex Book 8, we get a short story by the name of Dittophobia. We follow a young boy named Rory as he, essentially, goes through the gameplay of FNAF 4. He defends against the Nightmare animatronics in the same way you would in the game. That is until he wakes up. He explores the house looking for his parents, but there are no front doors. There is no way to leave. And unknowingly, he repeats this same night over and over again, repeatedly going back to sleep to continue this cycle. Eventually, he wakes up from a peaceful sleep for the first time in a long time. He finds that he's much older than he last remembered, now being around 17. The house is now decaying, and as he explores, he eventually finds Nightmare Bonnie. Only, it's not the Nightmare Bonnie we're used to. It's just an old costume on a flimsy metal endoskeleton. He eventually looks and finds that all of the animatronics are in the same situation. Old costumes being hung on weak metal endoskeletons. They're harmless. These endoskeletons were hooked up to tracks that would move them to different points around the house, doing what they would do in FNAF 4's gameplay, but most importantly, Rory finds gas tanks. He follows the hoses that connect to the tanks until he finds an old machine and a clipboard. On that clipboard, he finds that the gas from the tanks was pumped throughout the fake house to make him see illusions of the Nightmare animatronics, and to make him think everything is normal despite the situation. Eventually, he finds his way out of the decaying house and into an observation room, the same observation room from the underground facility in Sister Location. He finds out that there were apparently many more children that have gone through what he has gone through. The goal of these experiments was to find out how fear affected children's minds, and Rory was the final child put through these trials, though by the time he got out, the project was long since abandoned, but he was still stuck there going through the program endlessly. The story ends with Rory realizing he could never fit into modern society, and fixes the gas of the decaying fake house. He goes back to sleep, ready to start the cycle over again. So now, with both this story's information and the illustration of Nightmare Fredbear Michael drew, as well as the weird setup of the FNAF 4 house, everything makes a lot more sense. William Afton ran experiments on children using this fake house to test how constant fear affects a young mind. He did this on many different children, with Rory eventually being the final one. And it was done by pumping a special gas to make the children believe everything is normal during the day, and at night they would defend against these nightmarish versions of the Freddy's characters, not knowing they were empty costumes. Michael must have been one of these very children who William ran experiments on. He might have even been the first one, and it's more than likely he is who we're playing as in FNAF 4. So the Nightmare animatronics were real and a dream at the same time. They did technically exist as empty suits, but they were influenced by a dreamlike state to look like monsters. But let's talk about this massive elephant in the room. William put his own son through these horrific experiments. He actively made his own flesh and blood go through at the very least 5 to 6 nights of pure fear and paranoia and trauma-inducing imagery. And for what? Why did William do this to his own son? Well, as we know, William had 3 children, the first being Michael, the second being Elizabeth, and the third being the crying child. And in the minigames, the crying child is constantly harassed and eventually inadvertently killed by his older brother. I think you see the connection here now. Michael Afton is the older brother bully from the minigames, and all of a sudden, all of these minor character traits make sense. The snarkiness Michael showcases is almost one-to-one with the few lines the older brother has in the game. This is Michael. William stuck Michael into this nightmare-induced state as a punishment for what he did to his little brother, and he continually treated him as a disposable asset after this point, even sending his own son to quite possibly die in sister location. I got a lot of comments on my William Afton video saying that he most likely didn't actually care about his children, and while I see this point of view, there are a lot of examples of game William caring about the crying child and Elizabeth. For example, his "I will put you back together" speech, and him telling Elizabeth not to go near Circus Baby. But I genuinely believe William has no love in his heart for his eldest son. I believe Michael was only cared about by his father as a tool. He didn't love him, he only cared about how he was useful to him. Michael was the screw-up, the punk, the loser. He was a buff bully in his youth with an interest in things like art. William most likely considered him a disappointment. I mean, he acted out so often through his bullying, and this, like the crying child's anxiety, was most likely caused by William's parental neglect. And after this moment, after Michael inadvertently killed his little brother, he did everything he could to make it up to his dad. A theory I have is that Michael might have voluntarily been subjected to the gameplay of FNAF 4, but like Sister Location, he most likely wasn't told what he was getting into. Michael spent so much of his life after this one massive mistake trying to make it up to his father, doing anything and everything he says, and suffering anything and everything to get his love and approval. But as we know, Afton doesn't care about any of that. He only cares about Michael to the extent of how useful he is to him. The last thing I wanted to mention is in the final minigame cutscene. There's a bit of dialogue said at the beginning before it swaps to Fredbear, highlighted in gray text. This is what it says. Can you hear me? I don't know if you can hear me. I'm sorry. I firmly believe to this day that this is Michael apologizing to his younger brother on his deathbed, right before Afton goes into his whole "I'll put you back together" speech. Because this right here is the epicenter of Michael's character: guilt. Michael is a character that is completely, if not entirely, hinged on his guilt. Let me put something in perspective. If in FNAF 4 and Sister Location we are playing as a Michael who still blindly follows his father's orders to try and win his favor, he most likely had at least a fraction of an idea of what Afton has been doing. William has been killing children to try and experiment with living forever and bringing back his son. And Michael most likely knew all of this, but he bit his tongue and continued serving his father. Maybe due to childhood trauma, maybe due to knowing no way out of the situation. I don't believe Michael actually helped his father in his murders, but he more than likely knew what was happening and turned the other way. And now his monologue in Sister Location makes a lot more sense in hindsight. The melancholic tone, the shakiness of his voice. This is Michael coming to terms with the fact that his father never truly loved him, that he only cared about him as long as he was useful. And now that he's used up, now that he's become a monster, now that his life was over, he's going to go find him. He is going to finally stop what his father is doing. He was going to act, either for the good of his family or because of the weight of his guilt. He was first driven by the guilt of inadvertently killing his younger brother, and now what drives him is the guilt of knowing what his father was doing, and yet he did nothing about it. It is a constant cycle, and it burdens everything in his life. Because as we know, he keeps going back to every Freddy's location to try and find his father and sister and stop their crimes. It took us a while, but we finally have a view of Michael's characterization. Someone incredibly burdened by the guilt of his past mistakes and is driven by that guilt to try and stop the monsters his family has turned into. Now that we finally have a clear view of Michael's character, I think it's time we take a break from the main universe and talk about Mike's portrayal in the first Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Before we jump into this section, I want to clarify something. As we currently understand it right now, Mike in this movie is not an Afton. While this is Mike Schmidt, this is an alternate Mike entirely. Similar to the differing versions of Charlie from the books and games, while these two versions of the character may share similarities, they are not the same character. Now, maybe a future movie will do a plot twist and confirm that Mike is secretly an Afton, but with how this first movie is set up, I doubt it. Now let's dive into Mike's character in this film. Mike has the most scenes out of any other character in the film, which makes sense as he is the main character. Because of this, we are going to look at a select few scenes that, I feel, is integral to characterizing Mike and showcasing his arc in this film. The first three I want to look at is Mike's introduction, his security job at the mall, and his return back home. These all go hand in hand into giving us an idea on who he is at the start of this film. In his very first scene, we see Mike waking up from a deep sleep, and after getting up does a set of push-ups, gets ready to go to his job, and finally checks in on his sister so she can get up and get ready for school. A simple first scene, but conveys to the audience that Mike is his sister's guardian, and he tries to keep up a healthy routine before going to work. In the second scene, Mike talks with his co-worker Jeremiah about the concept of dream theory, the theory that our minds never truly forget anything, and with enough work we can recall any memory. Directly after this, he views what he believes to be a kidnapping, but instead of walking over and questioning the man, he tackles him into a fountain and starts beating him up. We find out later that this was the boy's father finding him after he left his side, so Mike loses his job for assaulting him without questioning him first. And in this third scene, we see Mike talk with his sister before going to bed, and we can actively see that while they love each other, their relationship is strained. Mike attempts to connect with her, but he really isn't trying, as he's too tired and preoccupied to engage in her interests. After this, Mike pops some sleeping pills, stares at a poster above his bed of Nebraska, and all of a sudden he is transported into a dream recreating his memory. In the dream, Mike and his family are in the woods having a nice picnic, and while his parents are cleaning up a spill, he is asked to watch his brother. For a split second, he is distracted by a frisbee, and in that second, his brother Garrett is taken by a kidnapper. Mike tries to run after him, eventually changing into his present-day age, but he can't catch up to the car. He can't save his brother. After this, Mike wakes up, and the movie continues on. So now that we've seen these first three scenes, we have a pretty good idea of who Mike is. At the start of this movie, we can see that despite his disheveled and tired look, he is actively trying to take care of himself and his sister as her only guardian. But despite that, the guilt of his past still actively weighs on him. The kidnapping of his brother affects him even now, causing him to abandon his security protocol in the mall. And it's not like he's trying to move on from it, as every night he pops sleeping pills and practices dream theory to go back to the memory of Garrett being kidnapped. Every night he tries to find some sort of detail that he missed, a license plate, a look at the kidnapper's face, something. But interestingly, if you look closely at the scene, the kidnapper is always wearing a black hoodie, and the license plate is always blacked out. Mike never looked at either of these things in the past, and no matter how many times he replays this memory, he will never see these details. I think these creative decisions were made to tell the audience right from the get-go that even though Mike has been trying to find something, anything to figure out what happened to his brother, he will never find answers in this memory. He keeps returning again and again, trying to find something in his past, hyper-focusing so much that he can't focus on the present. But there is nothing for him here. He has to move on. Of course, easier said than done. Mike still blames himself for what happened with his brother, even now. Trauma isn't easy to let go of, even years in the future. The guilt still weighs on him almost a decade after this event. This right here is Mike at the beginning of his arc. Let's see how he progresses, shall we? The next scene I want to talk about is in the middle of the film, where Mike and Vanessa have a one-on-one conversation by the river. And this also just happens to be one of my favorite scenes in the entire film. In this scene, Mike reveals everything to Vanessa, about how he returns to the same memory every night, about how he searches for any details he can find, and after he's finished, he assumes that now she's going to call him crazy, but she doesn't. In her words, she knows what crazy looks like, and Mike isn't it. Of course, this is her talking about William Afton, her father, and this coy comparison to her dad is important to the dynamic between Mike and Vanessa. Mike then begins to recount how before Garrett was taken, he saw his mom and dad as perfect parents that you would see on TV shows, how they would do cheesy family things all the time, and now that all these things are gone, now that his parents are gone, they're what he misses the most. This right here is Mike revealing a little bit more of his true motivation, even if he doesn't want to admit it. He doesn't just want to find out what happened to his brother or find the man that took him, he yearns for the perfect family dynamic that he had when he was a kid. Those simpler days of family cookouts and saying grace while holding hands right before a meal. I think now is a good time to say that from the beginning, Mike's quest to find out what happened to his brother was in vain. Even if by some miracle he does find a detail that can lead him to the kidnapper, what then? It's been at least a decade now and Garrett is most likely gone, his mother has passed, and his father is out of the picture. Even if he does find the person who took him, and he is brought to justice, it won't bring back those childhood memories. Mike has continually latched onto this idealized version of his childhood, and he can't move on from it to focus on his future because he feels like it's his fault. The guilt is still shackling him. But Vanessa, the daughter of a murderer, the child of such a wicked and evil man who also yearns for just a smidge of a loving family dynamic, hears all of this and cuts through it to tell Mike what he should be focusing on.
You and Abby, you still have each other.
From where I sit, I'd say you're lucky.
There are so many layers to this scene because as we the audience watch it for the first time, we assume Vanessa is just trying to look for the positives after hearing something so heartbreaking, but that's not fully the case after we learn that her father is William Afton. Vanessa at this point figured out that Garrett was killed by Afton. She knows that her father ripped Mike's family apart and she wants to tell him but just can't due to Afton's influence. But she's also someone who longs for a real family, who longs for what Mike had in the past but also for what he has in the present. Mike should be focusing on Abby first and foremost, but he's still actively going to sleep every night to try and find a ghost of his past. That's why I believe Vanessa throws his sleeping pills into the lake when realistically being asleep would only make Afton's plans easier. She's not only trying to keep him alert and active, she also wants him to focus on the present, on who he still has in the present. But as we know, he still goes back to sleep later on, and this advice falls on deaf ears. This scene does such a good job characterizing and showcasing what both of these characters want. They both want a healthy and loving family dynamic. Mike longs for what he used to have while Vanessa wishes for something she never had. But Mike has to make the new dynamic. He cannot bring back what he had, but he can make something new. It's so well done and it only gets better on repeat viewings. One of the last scenes I want to talk about in the film is Mike going to sleep one more time during his 5th night. By this point in the film, he's been communicating with the ghost children that are haunting the 5 animatronics. And in this dream, he is given the choice to have his perfect family back, just like how he wanted. And Mike is confronted with what he's been grappling with in the back of his head the whole movie.
Isn't what I asked for.
That's what you want?
Mike wants his family back. He wants to save his brother, even though that's an impossibility now.
You want to save Garrett, that's why you're really here. To change what happened.
But here, he's finally given the option to have everything he wanted. He can live in this dream forever with his mother, father, and brother. He can be happy, and all he has to do is give up Abby. And interestingly, I think the things that his fake family say to convince him to let her go is what he's been telling himself the whole time in his head.
It's time to let her go, sweetheart. You were never the right person to take care of her.
You were never the right person to take care of her. In this film, Mike has actively been working to try and take care of her, to get a stable job to take care of her, running himself ragged looking for a proper career and sustainability. But I think he's been doubting himself this entire time. This is just my interpretation, but I believe Mike may feel guilty not just because his brother was kidnapped on his watch, but because he thinks he robbed his younger sister of the perfect family dynamic he used to have, a dynamic he thinks he can't give to her. His Aunt Jane is a worse option when it comes to a guardian, but at least she has some form of sustainability. What does Mike have? A crappy night guard job at an old pizzeria? Abby was happy with the animatronics, a happiness he could never give her. Maybe letting her stay with them would be the better option. After all, you were never the right person to take care of her. So he accepts, he takes their offer, but almost immediately after he does, he regrets it. It all finally hits him. Mike, despite all his doubts, all his desires of going back to that simpler time, loves his sister, does everything he can for her, and as stated multiple times in the film, Mike is Abby's whole world. He may struggle, but he is the only one who should be taking care of Abby, and it's here where he truly realizes how lucky he is in the present to have her.
I made a mistake! Please, I don't want this! You leave Abby alone!
For all intents and purposes, Mike's arc is now complete in the film. After this, he busts into Freddy's, rescues his sister from the clutches of the animatronics, fights William Afton, and narrowly makes it out by the skin of his teeth. It's a nice climax, but the character moments for Mike are complete. The last scene I want to talk about showcases how Mike and Abby's relationship has changed. Now you can see him actively asking her questions, involving her in decisions, and joking around with her. It's cute, but it also showcases a very different Mike. He's still a tired little guy, and he's probably going to continue to struggle as he takes care of her, but now they communicate more than ever, and their experiences have brought them closer together. With all that being said, I'm actually very impressed with how the film took the main concepts of Michael's character in the games and applied them to the Mike in this film. I made a video talking about how the main core theme of FNAF, to me anyway, is the concept of letting go of the past. Mike's character arc in this film about him moving on from the loss of his brother and family and focusing on taking care of the family he still has in Abby is one of the best examples I've seen at how letting go can improve your future. Josh Hutcherson played Mike to perfection, and his performance gave a lot of depth to his character that the games lacked. I'm not sure where they plan to take Mike's character in the next film, but his arc seems pretty wrapped up. But with that being said, that's all I have to say on the film version of Michael. Before we get back to Michael in the games, however, I have to go over a confusing section that I like to call the Maybe Mikes. This section is going to be devoted to the times Mike might have been around. The reason why I say might have is because everything I've shown you before has had substantial proof to back it up, while all of the appearances in this section are a bit more lacking. The first being Five Nights at Freddy's 2. We know that in the main 5 nights and the 6th night, we play as a completely different night guard by the name of Jeremy Fitzgerald. But during the course of the game, Phone Guy talks about transferring him to the day shift, so he is not who we play as during the custom night. Upon completion of any challenge during the custom night, we are given a pink slip with the name of a new night guard, Fritz Smith. After FNAF 2, we never see Jeremy or Fritz again. There are theories of what happened to Jeremy, but Fritz is the one that's important to this video. The theory many in the community have is that Fritz is another name for Michael, another fake name that he used to get the job as a security guard. Applying this theory does make sense on how some random guy with no prior experience of dealing with animatronics would be able to hypothetically survive any of the challenges in Custom Night. The biggest reasons of evidence is the fact that on the pink slip, it lists very similar reasons for termination as Mike in the first game, including odor. The name Fritz Smith is also strikingly similar to Mike Schmidt. And in the FNAF movie, Mike's night guard introduction tape has the rubbed off name of Fritz, which does lend some credibility to this being true. The problem with this theory is that there's no real piece of evidence that can outright confirm it. Unlike with the Nightmare Fredbear drawing or the name on the keypad, we have no smoking gun to connect Fritz to Mike. The name on the tape in the movie is the closest thing we have to an official confirmation, but this could actually allude to Fritz being a previous night guard more than anything. There's just not enough to confirm that Fritz Smith is Michael, but there's also nothing saying he isn't Michael. The next maybe situation is Five Nights at Freddy's 3. FNAF 3 does not actually confirm who we're playing as in the game itself, and the question of who we're playing as has been a hot topic in the community since 2015. One of the most popular theories is that we are playing as Michael, since in his monologue at Sister Location, he says that he's going to go find his father, and while he says this, it shows the burned down Fazbear's Fright and William inside of Springtrap. So it's assumed that Michael is saying this in the past while we see the results of him finding his dad. We also have the fact that Michael filled out a logbook that presumably came from Fazbear's Fright, which lends more evidence to the theory. And I do like this theory, but the problem is there is something in the books that throws us off. In Fazbear Fright's Book 8, we get a story called What We Found. This story has us follow a young man named Hudson as he begins to work in the Fazbear's Fright location. While working there, he fends off against Springtrap and presumably the Phantom animatronics. The story ends with him presumably dying in an oven of all things. Now, it's important to remember, but unlike Tales from the Pizzaplex, which has a lot of proof that the stories could be canon to the games, Fazbear Frights is in a more gray area. I don't think the Hudson in the books is the exact same character we are playing as in FNAF 3, but could we have another version of Hudson in the games like how we have alternate versions of Henry and Charlie? That is possible. It's because of this reason that it's sort of left up to interpretation. We could be playing as Michael fighting against his father, which I think is a really cool full circle moment, or we could be playing as Hudson, who wandered into a story that only ends bad for him. Regardless, I doubt we'll ever get a real answer, but it's another thing to think about. I'm also going to quickly list all of the characters that share Mike's name in the books that most likely have no relation to our Michael at all. We have Michael Brooks, the boy who was murdered by William Afton and became Golden Freddy in the Silver Eyes trilogy, Mike, who is Oswald's friend in Into the Pit, Michael, who is Jake's uncle from The Real Jake, and Mike, who is Colton's uncle from Jump for Tickets. I know it might be weird to list off all these characters that simply share his name, but I want to make sure I cover everything. However, there is one more Michael from the books I want to talk about. This Mike appeared in the final story for the Fazbear Fright series, You're the Band, and I think this deserves its own section. You're the Band is a really special story for Fazbear Frights. Not only is this the final story in the book series, it's also considered a scrapped story, for a time anyway. You see, the final Fazbear Frights book was only released in a special box set, with the book titled Felix the Shark. The book was marketed as being 3 initially scrapped stories that didn't make it into the main Fazbear Frights books. Because of this, the book is explicitly not connected to the other books in the Fazbear Frights timeline, or any timeline. It's allowed to stand on its own. While I do like the 2 other stories, the obvious standout is, of course, You're the Band. The story follows Sylvia, a single mother of an 8-year-old boy named Timmy. Sylvia's husband was killed in a construction accident just before Timmy was born, but despite this, Sylvia wants to give him a wonderful life. After Timmy gains an obsession with Freddy Fazbear's Pizza from the internet, by the way, kinda hitting close to home there, Sylvia sets up a Freddy's themed birthday party. She's even able to find an authentic Freddy mask from an auction site, but when she went to buy more from the seller, she finds that they have disappeared off the internet. She gives Timmy the mask during his party, and he loves it. As he wears it, he calls his friends over to sing the songs from Freddy's, to which Sylvia exclaims, "You're the band!" After this point, it's almost like there were now 2 versions of Timmy, one that Sylvia has always known, and another that was a ghost of a past that doesn't belong to him. A while after the party, Timmy started to talk about the Fazbear murders, saying that he was there. He threw tantrums when he didn't get his way, and took interests in odd things that didn't seem like him. But the biggest red flag is when Timmy's grandfather during dinner one night tries to give him a steak knife to cut his meat, and in response, Timmy proceeded to tackle him and try to take the knife away forcibly, not wanting him to, quote, hurt Timmy. When he's pulled off, he says that he had to, quote, protect the others. One night, Sylvia watches as Timmy is lured away by a dark, shadowy figure. She attempts to chase after them, but is pulled into the bushes by a man who claimed to be looking for his dog around her house a few days earlier. And that man just so happened to be none other than Mike Schmidt. Mike tells Sylvia that he's a night guard at Freddy's, and suspects that the mask she bought online was actually the head of a Freddy Fazbear animatronic. He doesn't explicitly say it, but it's heavily implied that the soul that was bound to the Freddy animatronic might have moved into Timmy's body. Mike drives her to the remains of the old Freddy's location, and inside they find the Chica and Bonnie animatronics performing a song, with Timmy in the middle acting as their Freddy. Sylvia rushes to get Timmy, but black and white tentacles shoot out from the ceiling to wrap around her, constricting her limbs and eventually wrapping around her neck to choke her. Mike tries to pull them off, but Sylvia tells him to focus on Timmy. Mike takes the Freddy mask and places it on Timmy's face. The eyes of the mask glow blue for a second, and Mike quickly rips off the mask, freeing Timmy from the soul and sending it back into the Freddy head. The black and white tentacles are revealed to be the puppet, emerging from the ceiling and advancing towards Mike and Timmy, but stops as the real Freddy Fazbear animatronic steps onto stage with his head returned, continuing the song. After seeing this, the puppet lets go of Sylvia, and the 3 humans are allowed to leave Freddy's. As Mike drives them home, he explains that the shadowy creature that lured Timmy away was most likely the spirit that was in his head. The soul wanted to get out, which is why it tried to go back to Freddy's, but it was still trapped despite that. It wasn't until Mike put the mask back on Timmy's face and yanked it off could Freddy's soul move back into its proper home. It's also explained that the puppet was unknowingly trying to protect the soul without fully knowing what was going on. After Mike makes the two of them promise to keep the secret, he drops the mother and son at home. The next morning, Sylvia hugs Timmy, happy that he's safe, and the two decide to spend the day together. While simple, I really love this story. The Fazbear Frights books can range from pretty good to insanely bad, but every so often we get a really good story, and this is one of them. I love the positive mother and son relationship between Sylvia and Timmy, I love the puppet being protective over the animatronics, and more than anything, I love that this story gave us Mike as a fully realized character. In this story, Mike knows what's going on, he is clear and upfront with information, and most importantly, he fulfills his goal that he has in the games after Sister Location, saving innocent people from the horrors of Freddy's. In a way, he was stopping one of William's crimes from continuing to hurt others. He doesn't get much time in the narrative and is kept relatively simple, but I think that works for what the story is. It's hard to believe that we almost didn't get this story because, in my opinion, it's genuinely one of the top 5 Fazbear Fright stories just from its depiction of the legacy characters alone. Mike has always lacked content in the games, and other than the Logbook, most other FNAF media doesn't really bring him up, so to see a story handle his character so well is incredibly nice to see. I'm glad we got this story released. This Mike may not be the same as Michael Afton in the games, but it absolutely realized the potential of his character in some fantastic ways. And I think that leads me perfectly into the next game, where we, presumably, see the ending of Michael's story. Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator is a mixed bag for me. On one hand, it provides a lot of replayability thanks to its tycoon section. It gives us some definitive endings to certain plot lines and characters, with the big twist of this game being that this pizzeria is a trap set up by William Afton's business partner, Henry Emily, to trap all of the remaining animatronics and burn them all together to release their souls. On the other hand, it's fairly obvious that some characters in this game are absolutely shafted and given nothing to do in the story, and there's no better example to showcase this than with our very own main character, Michael Afton. Because I firmly believe we are playing as Michael in this game, even though there's nothing hard confirming it. But before we get into why I think that, let's recap the game. Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator is half tycoon, half sit-and survival. You play as, presumably, a random nobody who has bought the license to create your very own Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which makes you a Fazbear franchisee. While half of the game has you create your very own pizzeria, the other half has you fend off against the last of the major animatronic threats. These consist of Elizabeth inside of Scrap Baby, Charlie inside of Lefty, the remaining remnant and any leftover souls inside of Molten Freddy, and of course, William Afton, who has become Scrap Trap. The game gives you the option to salvage these characters for bonus revenue to upgrade your pizzeria, with the downside being that they will now hunt you while you do tasks during the Sit and Survive section. The lines that these characters say to us, the player, during the section gives a lot of hints of who we could be playing as, so we're gonna take a look at some. We're gonna skip Lefty though, since their voice lines all comprise of shushes. First up, we're gonna tackle Elizabeth/Baby.
You're not who I expected to see.
This is the first hint on who we're playing as, and while vague, it still gives a bit of vital information. Baby most likely expected a random security guard upon reaching the office, but the delivery implies that she knows who the player is personally. Considering Baby has had very limited interactions in the series, that narrows down who it could be.
It feels like home.
This one is a rather odd line, as on its own, it feels out of place. Why does this new pizzeria feel like home? Well, William Afton is finally reunited with his daughter. That might attribute to something. Maybe she has another family member already in the building as well? Regardless, this is another hint to help us solve this puzzle. Molten Freddy's lines are up next.
Together again!
This one is similar to Elizabeth. Molten Freddy recognizes the person we are playing as. It knows us, otherwise why would it say that we're together again? It wouldn't say this to someone it's never seen before. And while Baby has been booted from the amalgamation at this point, it can't be referring to her also being in the building because this line will play even if we don't salvage her. It has to be referring to the player, and again, like Baby, the Fun Times have had very limited interactions with characters, which once again narrows down who we're playing as.
One big happy family!
Now, in fairness, this line could mean one of two things. Either Molten Freddy is referring to the fact that it is made up of Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, and Bellora's innards, or it is referring to a different kind of family. As we know, Elizabeth and William are here, but now this is another hint that the character we're playing as is connected to the Aftons in a familial sense. Now we finally move on to Scraptrap/William. There's only one line that gives us a real hint.
You may not recognize me at first, but I assure you, it's still me.
This is a big one. Whoever we're playing as either knew Afton before he was spring-locked or during the events of FNAF 3 when he was Springtrap, which narrows down our pool of who this is even more. So with the hints of familial connection to Elizabeth and William, the family and home references, and the fact that Elizabeth, the Funtimes, and William know who he is, it's pretty obvious that we're playing as Michael Afton. He's the only character who makes sense to be in this position, who also knew William before all of this happened to him, who has history with the Funtimes, and who Baby would be surprised to see after all this time. Michael in this game has reverted to being our faceless, voiceless protagonist, with only a few minor references to the fact that we are playing as him, and it's honestly a shame. This is the final game that we know for sure features Michael, and the fact that he reverted back to what he was at the start of the saga, a faceless, voiceless protagonist, is a little sad. But also oddly fitting in a coming full circle type of moment, as Afton says in one of his voice lines,
"Bittersweet, but fitting."
Michael doesn't do all too much in this game. He participates in Henry's plan, either unknowingly or because he foresaw what he was trying to do. It's more than likely Michael might have known Henry from when he and William were running Fredbear's together, and played along with the plan knowing what awaited for him and the others at the end. Michael assembles all the animatronics in the pizzeria, he fends them off while running the business, and then at the end of the week, Henry enacts his plan and burns down the pizzeria, destroying all of the animatronics. Michael presumably stays behind along with Henry, and the two burn in the fire alongside their family members, ending the original Fazbear story. It's bittersweet and a bit lackluster, specifically for Michael. I'll admit, this isn't how I wanted to see the ending to our main character, and unfortunately, unlike Afton, there is no epilogue for him. He doesn't appear in Ultimate Custom Night. This is where the story of Michael Afton ends, but there are a couple things that do help sweeten this ending. The first is what Henry says during his big speech, referring to Michael directly.
"And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you. Although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling that's not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be."
I like that this is a part of the speech, because even if Michael doesn't do all too much in this game, this is what he wants. His goal was to free his family, and working with Henry finally helped to achieve that. I don't like to think Henry took over and did Michael's job for him. Rather, the two worked together, either unknowingly or strategically, to release their families from their prisons. Michael not only helped his family move on, but he too can finally move on. I like to think that before this, he did finally let go of the guilt in his heart for everything. Maybe this entire experience of running a pizzeria could have given him a bit of enjoyment, a bit of fun before he moved on. All we can really do is speculate, but it's something I like to imagine. While he doesn't appear in Ultimate Custom Night, he does get a mention in the secret Old Man Consequences Easter egg. You can hear William screaming in the background for Henry and Mike to help him. Here it is. Headphone warning, it's pretty loud. I find that very cathartic and satisfying. The man who barely cared about his son's own well-being is now calling out for his help. It's pathetic on his account and gives Michael that much more justice. And with the burning of the pizzeria, the story of Michael Afton ends. Now let us collect our thoughts and formulate in the final section. So who really was Michael Afton, aka Mike Schmidt? Well, he was something unique if nothing else. He started off as a silent nobody protagonist, a name with no personality or face to pair. Then nearly 5 games later, he did get a face, kind of, and a personality. kind of. His character was expanded in supporting material to the main story, and he never really got his big moment in the limelight. Like he said in his monologue, he was always hiding in the shadows. Despite us always playing as him, Mike didn't receive the focus a main character should have. But what he did receive was more lore relevance and fandom relevance. Michael, despite his low amount of screen time, is one of the most popular characters in the series. Because we have such limited information about him, fandom headcanons are rampant. But his popularity is also heavily attributed to his story and how tragic, yet in a way uplifting it is. Michael is a character that is burdened by guilt, the guilt of the mistakes he made in his youth and the guilt of serving his father, and for that he received the ultimate karma. He went through unimaginable pain and suffering, but came out of it wanting to make up for his mistakes. He is a character that realized his mistakes have hurt others and wanted to make up for them, and for years he endlessly tried and eventually succeeded in doing so. Through his actions, he did stop his father as well as the rest of the Fazbear monsters. Henry may have laid the trap, but it was Michael who brought them all together. So while he was Michael Shaftoned in Pizza Sim in terms of new lines or interactions, I do think the game wraps up his story nicely, in its own FNAF-y way. It's theorized that Michael might be in the newer games in some way, with countless theories including him either surviving the fire or having his spirit possess an animatronic, but personally, I think his story has been concluded. Maybe he will come back, who knows, but if he doesn't, I do think his story ended in a nice way. While he was burdened by guilt, he did make up for it. He was able to let go of his guilt and move on. And maybe that's something we can all learn to do as well. And with that, I have said everything I wanted to on good old Mike. Thank you all so much for watching. The support on my William Afton video has been overwhelming. Thank you all so much. As of writing this script, we're closing in on 100,000 views. It's utterly insane to me that so many people have watched my video, and I hope you all enjoyed this new video on Mike. If you did, liking it and subscribing would help out immensely. Comment down below who you would like to see me cover next. The most requested character will be the focus of the next video. I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching once again. I'll see you all later. Bye bye!